Together now? No, he's not here. Aaron Brown is not with us tonight. But who better to fill in than our man on the scene? Wolf Blitzer will host News Night. Wolf,
thanks very much.
The game is yours.
Thank you very much, Larry. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Good evening from Washington at the end of a very gray and somber and meaningful Veterans Day. The country is at war on an almost daily basis. An American dies in combat, often more than one. There are questions tonight, new questions, about whether in fact the fighting will yet pick up, and with it too, the dying. For people in Pittsburgh and Des Moines and Port Huron, Michigan, in big cities and small towns alike, Veterans Day might once have meant a parade or a white sail, or at the most a quick history lesson. It doesn't anymore, at least not on this Veterans Day. The whip begins with that reality, another day of developments in Iraq. And CNN's Matthew Chance starts us off with a headline. Matthew?
Wolf, thank you. The headquarters of the US-led coalition authority in the Iraqi capital, Baghdad, is again shaken by a series of explosions. There are no casualties reported, but this is an audacious attack which underscores just how bold these anti-US insurgents have become here in Iraq.
Matthew, we'll be getting back to you. Let's move on to the White House now and the President's Day, which included a meeting with the top American in Iraq. He happens to be in Washington right now. CNN's Dana Bash with the duty tonight. Dana, the headline.
Wolf, for the President, the tradition and ceremony of Veterans Day gave way to a detailed defense of his Iraq policy and an urgent and unexpected visit from Iraq's civil administrator, Paul Bremer. We'll tell you why. Wolf.
All right, Dana, stand by. Next to Riyadh in the rapid-fire investigation into Saturday's bombing. CNN's Nick Robertson with that. Nick, a headline from you, please.
Wolf, Saudi authorities say they've detained several people they believe are responsible or connected to the bombing over the weekend. Also, apparently Al-Qaeda has now made a claim of responsibility now to a Saudi political weekly magazine. Wolf?
Thanks very much, Nick. We'll get back to all of you shortly. Also ahead tonight, some interesting new issues popping up in the presidential campaign. We'll tell you all about those issues. And later, a fascinating trial and a surprising, many will say even shocking verdict in the case of an accused millionaire killer. And a giant from the early days of television is gone. We'll take a closer look at the career of Art Carney. And in segment 7, we'll look at one South Carolina town that's paid an extraordinary price for the war in Iraq. All that coming up in the hour ahead. But we begin with something an unnamed American official told the Reuters news agency today about the sudden return to Washington of Paul Bremer, the chief U.S. administrator in Iraq. When decisions need to be made, the official said, Bremer comes. And some decisions apparently need to be made right now. Decisions regarding the pace of transition to Iraqi control and possibly the tempo of the fight against Iraqi insurgents. Neither appears to be going very well right now, nor quickly enough for the White House, something we'll take up with CNN's Dana Bash in just a moment. First, though, another difficult day in Iraq. Here's CNN's Matthew Chance.
It was an attack from increasingly bold insurgents, yet another strike at the heart of the coalition. Inside the heavily guarded green zone, officials say they sheltered in basements as the mortars or rockets rained in. Eyewitnesses spoke of a major blast.
Suddenly we have heard a big, very big explosion which have taken place here near this school. This is an extraordinary explosion.
By your service, you have made our nation safer.
For the 130,000 US troops in Iraq, this Veterans Day has already earned extraordinary meaning. All are now veterans themselves, and as they remember comrades who have died, few need reminding of the difficulties still ahead. Staff Sergeant Mark Coulter spoke at a Baghdad Veterans Day ceremony.
Yeah, I know sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's difficult, and there's probably not a person in this room that's like, you know what, I'm just sick and tired of this. But remember, we're all a part of something that's larger than ourselves. And maybe in the future, someone else will stand up and tell a story about what you're doing now.
November has already proved the bloodiest month for US forces since the fall of Baghdad. The downing of a Chinook helicopter near Fallujah left 16 dead. 6 more died when their Black Hawk was shot down near Tikrit. exactly who's behind the now daily attacks continues to frustrate coalition commanders.
During the last few weeks, the pace and intensity of our offensive military operations has increased. We are taking the fight into the safe havens of the enemy in the heartland of the country, where we continue to face former regime loyalists, criminals, and foreign terrorists who are trying to isolate the coalition from the Iraqi people and trying to break the will of the coalition and the international community. They will fail.
It seems that in this insurgency, the foreign fighters of Al-Qaeda remain outnumbered by Iraqis bitter these US and coalition forces are still here. Well, Wolf, I seem to have lost contact with you in the studio, but let me just tell you what I was going to say at the end of that report, that the General Sanchez said that 5,000 people were being detained in various facilities across Iraq in connection with these insurgent attacks against US forces. He also said earlier today that 20 of those individuals were being investigated on suspicion of belonging or having links with the Al-Qaeda network. It still seems, though, that the vast majority of these insurgents are Iraqis themselves, disgruntled at the fact that their country is being occupied by that US-led coalition. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Matthew Chance in Baghdad, for that report. Let's move to the White House now, where Paul Bremer got a grilling from President Bush's national security team and met briefly with the president himself. For his part, the president again today cautioned Americans to be patient where Iraq is concerned, even as he paused to remember those who have died there. The report from CNN's Dana Bash.
Freeze on!
On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the president lays a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknowns, honors 19 million living veterans and those still serving.
They have liberated two nations, Afghanistan and Iraq.
Beyond the commemoration, urgency about Iraq and a detailed defense of his policy. The president accused Al-Qaeda-affiliated groups seeking revenge of forming an alliance with Saddam loyalists to kill U.S. troops.
Recent reporting suggests that despite their differences, these killers are working together to spread chaos and terror and fear.
Sources say that information is part of a new report detailing the scope and source of the attacks on the ground, and was discussed at hastily arranged White House meetings with Iraqi Civil Administrator Paul Bremer and top national security officials. Also at issue, White House concern the U.S.-picked Iraqi Governing Council is ineffective and may not meet a December 15th deadline, paving the way for elections. Nearly 400 servicemen came back from Iraq not as veterans, but casualties of war. 38 from Iraq buried at Arlington National Cemetery, including Captain John Robert Teal, laid to rest just last week, killed by a roadside bomb northeast of Baghdad.
This is only one thing I want to make real clear, and it's in my will. I want to be buried at Arlington, my full dress uniform, full military honors.
Captain Teal's mother, Emmy, received the sympathy letter Mr. Bush sends to families of those who died. She says she wants the U.S. military to be more aggressive in retaliating against those who killed her son.
When they're fighting down and dirty, you got to get in the ditch and get dirty.
And a more aggressive security strategy and political transition will top the agenda here tomorrow morning. Paul Bremer heads back to the White House to meet with the president and his national security team to talk about how to more quickly transfer governing power back to the Iraqi people. Wolf.
Dana, there's a CIA assessment of the security situation in Iraq that's now circulating here in Washington. I know you know about it. What else can you tell us about it?
Well, what we know about it, Wolf, is, and first of all, this is a topic that they did discuss here at the White House and will likely tomorrow, but it is essentially laying out some of the concerns and really some of the growing concerns on the ground in Iraq, essentially saying that some of the Iraqi people who were not involved in the insurgency are now becoming more involved, are becoming more active in coordinating some of these attacks, and that is the major concern here. And not only is it happening in and around Baghdad, but into the north and the south, where the attacks were not as aggressive. That is something that the president wants to talk to Paul Bremer and other top national security officials about. An ominous assessment indeed. Dana Bash at the White House. Thanks, Dana, very much. From the Pentagon today came confirmation that if much of Iraq is struggling through a post-war period, in one portion of Iraq, the war goes on. This is the so-called Sunni Triangle, which has been a problem from the beginning and clearly the main challenge today. Here's CNN's Jamie McIntyre.
With attacks against U.S. troops on the rise in Iraq, counterattacks are up too. American commanders report anti-insurgent engagements have doubled in recent weeks, up to about 30 to 35 a day. Citing what sources say is fresh intelligence, President Bush contends 93% of the anti-U.S. attacks are occurring in a relatively small area, 5 Iraqi provinces that make up a 200-square-mile Ba'athist triangle.
Here the enemy is waging the battle, and it is here that the enemy will be defeated.
The U.S. believes some of the attacks are being conducted by foreign fighters, but it's having a hard time finding clear links to al-Qaeda.
At one point, we had up to about 20 suspected al-Qaeda members, but as we have continued to refine and interrogate, we have not been able to establish definitively that they were al-Qaeda members.
Sanchez says he thinks several hundred terrorists have entered Iraq from Syria, Egypt, Sudan, and Yemen. But the Pentagon still believes its primary foe remains the remnants of Saddam Hussein's regime.
The first thing in being able to take care of the current threat we face is to understand who the enemy is. And we certainly know that the former regime elements, the Ba'athists, if you will, are the major part of that.
The Pentagon says with each successful raid, with each discovery of arms, the U.S. is getting closer to breaking the resistance. And the Pentagon says it has passed a milestone in the Iraqization of the security forces. With 131,000 Iraqis under arms, the Pentagon says that number now surpasses the number of U.S. troops in the country. Jamie McIntyre, CNN, the Pentagon.
On to Saudi Arabia now. Officials there questioning people in connection with the deadly terror bombing on Saturday. No word yet who or how many people have been talked to or taken into custody. The top spokesman for the royal family told CNN today he is convinced this was the work of al-Qaeda and that it wasn't a botched attempt to kill Americans. Al-Qaeda, he insisted, also wants to kill Muslims. Whatever the case, Saudis and other Arabs today no longer believe themselves immune from attack. Here's CNN's Nick Robertson.
Shooting and first blast.
Just yards from Saturday's massive car bomb, Lebanese dentist Ziad Salmeh leads the way through the remains of his house.
I was hiding here, just here. You can see, maybe this is the only and the safest place here because you don't have a glass here.
Returning now to retrieve valuable possessions, he's amazed he survived.
Here.
And the bomb went off right outside there.
Elsewhere in the compound, other families prepare to leave, packing up what they can salvage. Turkish accountant Samir thought security at the compound was good, but worries who can make him safe now.
Security is good or not good. But you know, how I know this is good or not good? Yeah, this is...
Picking up his child's broken toys, Egyptian businessman Amir, like all here, contemptuous of their attackers.
We don't know why, actually. We don't know why. We don't know what's the reason behind this. Definitely it's not in the Quran or in Islam.
Saudi officials are vowing to track down al-Qaeda, to fight them to the bitter end. The destruction here is an indication just how bloody and difficult that battle could be. Knowledge of a prior attack the Saudi officials say they had in this case, it seems, is not enough to stop those attacks happening. Among American women here, diverse views over just how troubling that uncertainty is.
Clearly, it seems that no matter how many safety features we install, there's still that part of the fear factor is definitely there.
I don't live on a compound, I live in a home. And I feel just as safe now as I did yesterday and the day before.
For all at this well-to-do gathering, however, concerns for children now top priority.
Okay, and when you see a checkpoint right by your children's school, my first thought was, do I drop them off at school or do I take them home? Are they safer inside of a Saudi school or in a car with their American mother?
Back outside the destroyed housing compound, tightening security. Likely the solution most here will be taking for some time to come.
But it's not just this visible security that Saudi officials say has been increased. They say they are now getting more intelligence tip-offs from Saudi people, people who are disappointed with what they've seen in the last few days. People are angry that they've seen Muslims attacked by other Muslims. Wolf?
Nick, we know that there are many Americans who work in the oil industry and other industries in Saudi Arabia. Do you get any indication they're getting out of there, they're picking up and leaving?
You know, most of the people we've talked to, most of the Americans we've talked to here, and there are 35,000 of them in Saudi Arabia, they're telling us, the majority are saying, look, they're concerned that they're making, there are places they're not going to, they're perhaps not going out in the evening, staying on their compounds, but really it is rare to hear them say, look, if it gets worse, we're going to leave. And many of them who live here, Wolf, really enjoy the lifestyle they have here, enjoy some of the comforts of living here, and they don't want to lose it. And at the moment, things haven't reached that kind of level. Wolf?
CNN's Nick Robertson in Riyadh for us tonight. Thanks, Nick, very much. Ahead on Newsnight, more on what Paul Bremer's surprising visit to the White House may mean. And later, the millionaire who admitted the killing but was found not guilty of murder. We'll have the details. And we'll also look back at the career and contributions of Art Carney. He died at the age of 85. This is Newsnight from Washington.
Newsnight with Aaron Brown is brought to you by Pacific Life. Annuities, insurance, and investments. Rely on the strength of Pacific Life.